Hi, I'm Seamless, and this is another episode of Doing Stuff. This one that's happening right now isn't being streamed. That's because this is actually going to be kind of a short one. I had a thought. I'm preparing for a talk that I'm going to do in Belgium pretty soon, where I'm going to talk about what makes FL nice and all, like why I like FL and kind of thing. Pretty basic stuff. I think mostly mostly revolving around the whole flexibility concept. But one of the ways, wow voice. One of the ways that I was gonna demonstrate this was talking about how Patra works and illustrating a pretty common thing people want to do, which is mid-side processing. And I've altered my default Patra to have some built-in stuff here, so I have knobs on the surface, and I have these envelope controllers, so I can get straight to macroing stuff without having to do that every time. But what I want to mess with today is mid-side vocoding. So mid-side stuff is pretty straightforward. It's that you have, like, if you don't know what the mid and side are, mid represents information that is shared evenly between both speakers, which is what we represent as mono. And then side is information that is unique to either the left or the right speaker, which is what stereo is. When we hear stereo sounds, it's because there are differences between the left and the right speaker, which gives it this large feeling. There's all kinds of stuff that we do to try and mess around with that to sort of bring it in together or whatever. And mid-side processing is one of those where you can you have an effect like an EQ or a compressor or something, and then apply itself differently to either only the mono or only the stereo. There's lots of reasons for this. But generally speaking, it's largely to control or even to create in some ways stereo. And now I want to see what happens if we do mid-side freaking vocoding. And the reason why I want to figure this out is because the hallmark of what Patra is what I was talking about is that we could just do straight up mid-side processing of anything, because all we need to do is separate the mid from the side and then put whatever differences we want to have on it. Inside Patra, you do this by adding a separate output, and then you have this in-out difference thing. And when you have all this together, it creates phase cancellation. And then what gets canceled out gets put out the secondary output. And in this configuration, what this represents is one of them is only mono and one of them is only side. So if I have something that actually has stereo in it, come on. Then when I mute one, we get only stereo or only mono. Now, some of the things that we've been doing, that I have been doing with vocoding, is the vocode the same thing. The vocode the thing, the sound to itself. There could be modulators. Modulators are fine, separate actual modulators. But for the most part, I've been vocoding the same thing, and that's worked out just fine, given what vocoders do to things and how it creates the sound, which imparts the vocally characteristic onto things. And of course, what I'm doing here, putting this high-pass filter before all this mess, is because the high-pass filter, if you didn't know, is the same filter that's inside wah pedals. So whenever you get that wah-wah kind of feel, that's coming from a high-pass filter, or sometimes a bandpass filter, but most of the time, high-pass filter. And so it makes sense that this is the sort of modulation that we have going into the vocoder, because that creates enough of a formative vocally nature that the vocoder has something to latch onto. I'm actually going to put a big old low pass right here, because, or rather high pass, separate one, because those lower frequencies, when they get whipped around that fast, tend not to sound good to me. So, all right, here's our mono, and here's our stereo. So I want it noted that I actually haven't done any experimentations with this before. I've done mid-side processing with the expected things like EQs and compressors, but this specific thing with the vocoder is 100% new, and you're watching me do it fresh. This will only last about maybe half an hour though, because I have places I need to be. Actually, I'm going to compress the side because we need more level. Oh, that's special sounding. Let's give it slightly different. And I'm actually going to compress this too just to keep it even. That's too much. Actually, I suppose for this one I can just turn it up. I don't really need to worry about it. Alright, so here's the first problem that I sort of assumed would happen. Phasing from latency. Suppose actually if we're going to do that, I need to have the same thing on everything, but then in this case I'm just going to turn all the settings off. Oh, that is just doing its thing. That's a little better. You could probably not be compressing much. Well, now, actually, that rumbling is coming from the limiter that's on the master because I just installed FL 12.4 and I forgot to turn off clear settings, which means everything is defaulted. We'll, however, put our real maximums over here. And I suppose to finalize this particular sound, I would need... remember I was talking about macroing? I really should have macroed this to there, but I just didn't because I wasn't paying attention. The whole purpose of me trying to be more organized about this particular aspect is that, one thing I noticed about sound design is that in the process of making a sound that you want to make, you often make 6 or 7 cool sounds in between. And I want to be able to save them in such a way that, because if I save this automation like this is no longer being automated by anything, and I'm not going to remember how it's linked and what range I'm setting and that kind of thing. So if I just do that with the envelope controllers, then I don't really need to worry about it anymore. And I can iterate to my heart's content. Why did I come over here? Oh yeah, separate sub. Because I had passed the original. This might actually matter more if I do more different things. Like if I have different, even modulators. That could be interesting if I have different modulators for this. That might not be rhythmically aligned though, is the problem with that. So I was trying to make it like a clear difference between like there's a lower value here, but like I think really the problem is that the sound that I made isn't really deep enough to create this. Like if I made more of an FME kind of thing, this might be clearer. That's kind of interesting. I put different release times on the stereo versus the mono. Although now we have a new problem, which is that the stereo coming out of here is lopsided. That's always a fun thing to have to deal with. Could try messing around with the unison index mapping on things. We're getting somewhere. See, now it's all mono, there's no change at all. We could get even crazier and introduce some reverb. Actually, I could just do this in here. So what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to make it sharper by ring modulating it. And what I did over here was I ring modulated the output oscillator, but the output oscillator is modulating its input modulation, which means that it's controlling all the input modulation all at once versus specific input modulation, which is why I'm instead ring modulating the second operator, which is the one responsible for FMing the first operator. Operator 3 is FMing operator 2, but if I control the volume coming out of operator 1, this is essentially controlling the FM from operator 2 rather. So while operator 1 is controlling the FM from these guys by controlling all of them that are going into operator 1, which is in this case just operator 2 is the tail end of it. So if I turn this off, then this just becomes a straight up triangle wave. So that's why I'm ring modulating it, and it's giving a slightly extra bite out of it. So, I mean, this kind of worked in a sense that there's definitely increased stereo going on here, but like it's still like a dumb sound. Like it's still very pasty sort of feeling. It's not, I don't really know what I expected. But it's an interesting experimentation. It did open up some new ideas for me. I think what I might try doing later is doing a whole different mid and side splits, like whole different sounds. So it's like, instead of splitting one thing two different ways, have one thing that is mid and the other thing that is side. And so it's essentially a layer at that point, which is not something I do very often. In fact, a lot of this is probably stuff that a whole bunch of people have been doing a long time. I just have not done a lot of mid-side stuff just because I mostly saw a mid-side from a sound design perspective as being something that exists to solve problems. And the problems being mostly about stereo image. And you could definitely fix a lot of stereo image problems using mid-side stuff. However, I also prefer to fix those problems before they get to be problems at the level that necessitates that they get fixed at that level. I rather fix the problems from the source rather than trying to solve it later. And there's not like a good or bad reason for that. That's just how I feel about things. As a result, it means that I don't do a lot of mid-side stuff. But I have missed it seemingly entirely its whole point in the sound design perspective, which is to do interesting layers. There was also an idea that a student gave me. This is kind of related. It's not quite mid-side processing, but his name was Cameron, I believe. He came up with the idea of doing positive and negative splits, because we have straight up, wave shaping, and then we have bipolar wave shaping. Regular wave shaping will shape both sides of a waveform, the positive polarity and the negative polarity, evenly on both sides. So whenever you make any kind of changes, they happen to both sides independently. You might have thought that what was happening inside interest just then was wave shaping because it seems similar, but it might be. I don't know. I don't really know about that. But we have bipolar mode. We are able to screw around with the positive and the negative separately, where it separates it into quadrants. We have here's the positive and here's the negative. We can do things like bring the positive into the negative. We can even bring negative into positive by doing the opposite. But the point being is that we can operate on them independently. So what the student came up with was essentially doing a split, where we have a wave shaper that exists that says, cool, there's nothing coming out of here, everything coming out of here, and then we have another one that's set up to do the opposite, and then we apply effects on them independently, which it doesn't quite work out the way that you would think it would, in the sense that, like, if you wanted it so that, like, only everything, like, if you do this at the beginning and you have an effect on it, what's going to happen is that some of that effect is going to bring the positive and the negative and positive. But if you do this at the end of a chain, which is to say that you have the whole effect chain going all the way down to the very end, and then you do this, then it really will be, here, this half is one effect, and this half is another effect. And I experimented with it once or twice, and I didn't really see a lot of stupendous use out of it, but there could be some cool stuff involved with there, much like mid-side. And layering at large, it's just not what I usually prefer. But those are cool ideas. And I wanted to mess around with them. I wanted to see if that was something that could happen. And I hope some part of what I did here gave you guys ideas. I just wanted to put that out into the world as a concept. And I wanted to see how far I can get with it in about half an hour. But yeah, if you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.